Don't think that this idea of proving the existence of God has anything to do with doubt about God. Doubt about God is a modern concept. There are very few ancients who had any doubts about God. And the people trying to prove the existence of God were largely deeply religious people. They were deeply devout people. So why do you think they would try to prove the existence of God? Because they felt that faith should be based in reason. They felt that in order for faith to be on firm foundation, it should have the foundation of reason. And that's why they attempted, to the best of their ability, to create a rational foundation for belief. And this again gets to reason and tradition, this problem. So they were trying to synthesize the essential problem of aql and naql. How do we get naql to correspond with aql, or vice versa? And they made many, many attempts. At a certain point, because of massive confusion that was beginning to reign in the Islamic lands, a group of people show up. One was in Egypt, Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, and he dies in 321, which is 933 of the Christian era. The second is from Basra and teaches in Baghdad, two cities that are in the news a lot. And in those days, the wars were with sandals in the mosques, throwing shoes at each other when they disagreed. Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, now they're using them to hit statues and things like that. So tradition's hard to get rid of. Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, who dies in 324, and that's 935. And then Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, who is he's born in Maturid, and dies in Samarkand, in what's called traditionally Khorasan, the land where the sun rises. Khorasan, sun is sun, Khora. So it's Khorasan, the land where the sun comes up, which is the East or Asia. We would call it now Central Asia. And he comes from that place. Now what's interesting about Central Asia is he came from a place that was a center of Buddhist learning. And I find this deeply significant. I actually wrote a paper called How the Buddha Saved Islam. It's a paper in which I tried, and I've never seen this anywhere, but I really tried to show that the paradoxical formulas that are introduced by the Maturidis and the Ash'aris were actually coming out of Buddhist logic. And the Buddhists had a massive impact. A lot of people don't know this, but they actually had a massive impact. The tolerance of the Abbasid period, I believe, is largely due to the influence of Buddhism, because the Barmekkids, who were the great ministers of the Abbasids, were from Afghanistan, and that family was a famous Buddhist priest family. They're very tolerant, deeply tolerant people, and they introduced a lot of this extraordinary tolerance during the Abbasid period into the Islamic tradition, and removed a lot of the very harsh interpretations. And they textually justified it, which is what's so beautiful. And that's why the danger of religion is that it is open to multiple textual interpretations. And it's which one are you going to choose? And in a sense, that is revealing something about your essential nature. What are you attracted to? Because you can find harshness, you can find cruelty in all the religion. And then you can find all these other qualities. And I feel that the other qualities are the dominant qualities. It's almost like those harsh and cruel aspects. It's like a shadow, a Jungian shadow religion that exists alongside the true religion to almost separate people and to reveal themselves. Because hypocrisy is the worst type of personality, the one who's hiding his true nature. So these three men all are existing. I mean, look at that. 333, 321, 324, and 333. I mean, this is their death dates. So these three men are all living at the same time, and they formulate these creeds that basically save Islam. Now, Imam al-Tahawi is more of a naql. He's not interested in aql. And he has very few, if any, he has a few, but he has very few what is mistermed speculative theological formulas. It's mistermed. I would say more rational. The Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari is, in a sense, a bridge between aql and naql. But Imam Abu Ja'far al-Maturidi takes it to a much deeper level, the three, in terms of this fundamental problem. And what's interesting is the great creedal formula of the Muslims becomes the formula of Imam al-Nasafi, who was a Maturidi, with the commentary of Taftazani, who was an Ash'ari. And this is what was taught in our madrasas for centuries. I mean, these are the two great texts. One is a commentary by an Ash'ari, but the other is a creed by a Maturidi. And these three men represent what comes to be known as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They basically create creeds. They produce creeds. And credo in Latin means I believe. So a creed is what you believe. You say credo, I believe. And that's why in the beginnings of these creeds they always say aqulu mu'taqidan. I say believing. So the aqida is what you're bound to. It's what you have conviction about. It's aqadtu. It's what you're knotted. It's what you've bound to. It's what you believe and have conviction about. And this becomes the aqida. This is the word that's used in ours for the creed. So they call it the aqida al-nasafiyya, the aqida al-tahawiyya, the aqida al-ash'ariyya, like that. And then each one of these, Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi and Imam al-Maturidi are the two Hanafis. And Imam al-Ash'ari, there's a debate. The Malikis claim him as a Maliki, and the Shafi'is claim him as a Shafi'i. So, and I think probably the stronger argument is that he was a Shafi'i, but his greatest student by one, there is a mediary between the two. His greatest student is Abu Bakr al-Baqallani, who was a Maliki scholar who develops what's known as the atomic theory in Islam, and it's probably the most sophisticated pre-modern theory. And there's a book called The History of the Atom, and there's a chapter on the Muslim atomic theory, and they do admit that. The scientist that wrote that book said that this is clearly the most sophisticated pre-modern atomic theory that we have. And he also says that he doesn't really understand how they got it, the Muslims. And so they were thinking very deeply about that. Now, I believe also there's a connection between the Buddhist atomic theory and Abu Bakr al-Baqallani's theory, because there's a lot of similarities. And that is obviously deep speculation, and there's Muslims that did not like that at all. And that tended to be within the Hanbali tradition. You have a fourth strain. From these three men, you have a fourth strain, which is the Hanbali strain. The Hanbalis tended to be, although Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari would use Imam Ahmad as his foundation, in a sense, because Imam Ahmad was considered the Imam of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It's his laqab, because he had such an important role to play in protecting Islam from the Mu'tazilites. He was honored with that. And so, in that sense, now Imam of the four Imams, the three Imams, Abu Hanifa, Malik, and Shafi'i, have more room for aql, and the most is Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu. He is the most rational. He is a legal philosopher in a way. Imam Shafi'i is also, but Abu Hanifa will use aql more than any of the other Imams. Ahmad ibn Hanbal is the least inclined to do that. He will prefer a weak hadith over analogical reasoning, and that is in his madhab, which gives total lie to this idiotic idea that weak hadiths have no place in Islam. If Ahmad ibn Hanbal uses weak hadiths before he uses qiyas in his usul, I think that exposes the ignorance of people who claim that weak hadiths are worthless. On the contrary, they've been used for centuries by our greatest scholars. So, of those three, of the four strains, the Hanbali strain will be the least inclined to any type of rational approach to creed. And it will get to the point where the anthropomorphists, who are a problem in all religions, not just the Muslims, this phenomenon is a phenomenon within religion, are people that take things literally. In other words, believe in the literal meaning of everything that is said. And that is absolutely impossible to do with any text of Revelation, because the nature of language is that there is always analogy and metaphor, always. You cannot get out of it. It's impossible. It is simply impossible. And it leads to very difficult. Even the literalists who deal with the Quran, they get into big problems in interpreting certain verses in the Quran and create very clever rhetorical devices to deal with those problematic verses for them. Like ask the town, فَسَلَ الْقَرْيَةِ. Ask the town. How do you ask a town? I mean, what's a town? What do you mean ask the town? Do you mean ask the people of the town? Do you mean ask... if it's literally the town. Town, can I ask you a question? Chicago, I'd like to ask you. Well, I can say that. I want to hear what Chicago has to think about all this. Now, obviously, I mean you people here from Chicago. Well, that's metaphor. And that's in language. It's just the way it is. The White House announced today. Nobody saw these bricks that are painted white saying something, right? At least as far as I know. Announce things. So this aql and naql is what Abu al-Mansur al-Maturidi is trying to bring together, this understanding. Now, the third formulation is amongst the people who deal with ihsan, or the spiritual science of Islam. So the providential care that we see in this community is during the period we see Al-Harith al-Muhasibi, who's 243, Imam al-Junayd, who is probably the great formulator of the tradition, in 297, and then Ash-Shibli, his student, 334, Abu Talib al-Makki, 386, and then I would add Rabi' al-Adawiyya to that, because she introduced the idea. She really is credited with the introduction of the idea of love of God being higher than fear of God. And it's a very important introduction into the Islamic tradition. The Bakka'un, who were these men that literally became so enveloped with fear of God that they stopped eating, they'd cry all the time. They were basically dysfunctional from this immense fear. And she introduces this idea that love is such a higher concept when dealing with the divine. And that becomes very strong within that tradition. Now, that Islam, the four Imams, Iman, these four traditions, and then ihsan, these four Imams, and adding Rabi'a as the fifth in that science. They basically formulate Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. It becomes a religion in the sense that we can study it in an organized, schematized way. That was not true in the first community. It just wasn't, because much of it was experiential. And you could ask the Sahaba, they knew all these things. They had immense knowledge of all three subjects, but they did not have Bab al-Wudu, or Bab al-Tahara, or Bab al-Nikah, and dividing Nikah into different types, and having different types, Salih and Fasid, or the five formulations. So here you have the philosophers that are pure rationalists. You have the traditionalists, which were the Muhaddithun, who are pure traditionalists. They're not interested in aql, they're interested in naql. And that's why the fuqaha say the muhaddith is a pharmacist. He's not a doctor. So never get a prescription from a pharmacist. All the pharmacist knows is naql. See, what the doctor has is aql. He knows how to apply, he knows how to put things together, he knows how to, we hope. Right? But that's what the physician, he learns how to discern between signs and symptoms, what if you have jaundice, what that means, and then what is the prognosis, where it's going, all these things. So that's the faqih. And rarely do you get the two together. Now the same is true about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's these creedal formulations. You have the creed, which is naql, but then you have to have an understanding of it. This is aql. And so bringing these two together, this is what Fakhruddin al-Razi says is the meaning of nurun ala nur. That light upon light is revelation on intellect. And Raghib al-Isfahani said, never be impressed with a person's Islam until you've tested their intellect. Because the most dangerous thing that you can have is intellect without religion, or religion without intellect. It's a disaster. Both are disasters. Intellect without religion leads to concentration camps, gas chambers. We've got a problem. It's called the Jewish problem. And what's the most efficient way to deal with this problem? I mean, this is pure reason. I mean, there's people that could argue against that, but ultimately, this is how they perceive the world. This is how Nazi Germany perceived the world. Efficiency. And we were the Obermensch. We're the people beyond good and evil. We're not, because in the Kantian moral argument for the existence of God, what Kant says is the understanding of good and evil is the greatest proof for the existence of God. Because without God, you could have no understanding of good and evil. And this is what happens when revelation is removed from intellect. Because intellect can be evil. And this is what, in the golden mean, intellect is a mean between craftiness and between stupidity. So the intellect can be used for evil. And religion without intellect leads also to gas chambers. They might be metaphorical ones, but again, we have a problem. The Americans are our problem. Well, let's just kill them all. I mean, that's a great solution. Because God said, kill them wherever you find them. So let's just do that. I mean, this is what happens when you divorce one from the other. You end up with the same result, which is brutality, a loss of your humanity. It's really extraordinary. And this is why bringing these two together is so difficult, and yet our religion has been so brilliant at doing it. And the man that did it is called the proof of Islam, Hujjatullah al-Ghazali. He is the man that brought it all together. He brought the fiqh, the usul. He was a master. He's one of the greatest usuli scholars in history. He brought the Aqida. He brought the philosophical tradition, and he brought the spiritual tradition, and he synthesized it into this extraordinary exposition of Islam where he said, don't fight each other. These are not mutually exclusive meanings. Can't you see you're all looking at things from a different perspective, and what you need to recognize is this is a diamond that has different facets. And it is the divine light that comes into that diamond that refracts it into this extraordinary rainbow of colors that yasurra nadirin, delight those who look at it.